Good morning, my friends, my family. Welcome back for part 3 of this lesson this week, God of the Fearful. We are looking at the life of Isaac, and we are already recognizing that he faced many things in his life that made him fearful, and in a good way and in a bad way. He dealt with a lot of fears and insecurities in himself, mostly because he had gone through some very traumatic events. He had lost both of his parents. He had been the boy on the altar in the very beginning of his life, and it was a very tough upbringing that he faced. But in that moment of his low times, he found a fear, a reverence of God, and he began to build a relationship built on trust. His story does not end with both of his parents passing away, though. Isaac faced another fear when it became very clear that Rebekah, his wife, was barren. For 20 years, they had no child. Again, as with Abraham and Sarah, the devil was trying to stop God's plan for Abraham's seed to flourish. Isaac must have feared that he was facing the same barrenness that his parents had faced. How often do we fear reliving the struggles of our parents? Isaac knew firsthand how barrenness could devastate a marriage and a family. He had watched all of this happen. He had heard the story hundreds of times from his father and his mother. And so here he was looking at this issue and saying, "Oh God, please don't let me go through what my parents went through. Please don't let this happen to me and my wife." Beyond that, a tribal chieftain in that day who did not have an heir was a great stigma in their culture, because it would lead down to a breakdown of tribal structure. If there's no heir, then someone else can come in and take over the tribe and take over the way that family works. Without a strong heir, who would care for Isaac and Rebekah in their old age? All those fears must have hit Isaac every morning when he woke up, and he had to choose, I'm either going to listen to these fears, or I'm going to change my fear over to fear in God, reverence of God, and trust in Him. He could have allowed those fears to bury him, but rather than living in fear, Isaac took those fears to the Lord. And we see that in Genesis 25:21 when it says that God entreated the Lord for his wife. He dealt with the fear for 20 years. He dealt with it, and he instead of feeling buried by those fears and feeling overwhelmed by them, he chose to find the place of comfort that he knew would be there. He had already discovered that comfort when his mother passed away. He had already discovered that comfort when Abraham passed away. He knew that God would be his comfort. And so in this moment of fear, he looked for his comfort in God. He interceded for new births into their family. If we are not seeing new births in the family of God, often our response is fear. Will there be a next generation who will rise up and continue the work of God? Why are children not being born again into the church? Our response to this pressing problem should not be avoidance, and it should not be fear. Instead, like Isaac, we should take it to the Lord by faith, entreat him, and intercede for the lost and the ones that we love, and God will hear. If you are praying for a baby that has not yet been born in the church, not yet been born again, don't feel overwhelmed. Oh God, you see the decisions they're making. Oh, I'm so overwhelmed by the amount of sin in their life. Oh, I'm so overwhelmed by the problems that they are facing and the addictions that they're giving way to. Instead of letting yourself be overwhelmed by that, do what Isaac did. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Entreat him on that behalf and intercede for a new birth in that person's life. Because God answered Isaac, Rebekah not only conceived, she conceived twins. I feel bad for her. It was not a comfortable pregnancy. The two children, the Bible tells us, struggled inside of Rebekah's womb. When I was carrying Liam, I often felt, okay, is there something else in there? Because this little boy's going crazy all the time. He moved constantly. I felt like my skin was going to rip apart. He just loved to move. I cannot imagine how it must have felt to be Rebekah and to have two young men inside of you, two baby boys, fighting with each other inside of your womb. This was before the days of the ultrasound, so Isaac and Rebekah had no way of knowing that they were expecting twins. Many people thought I was expecting twins because Liam stuck out so far when I was expecting with him. But they didn't have the luxury of getting the peace of mind to know, oh, it's one baby, it's two baby. They had to go and to ask God, Rebecca was so upset about the way that her pregnancy was going that she began to pray. She said, God, why? Why? What is going on? Why is this so uncomfortable? Why is there so much movement inside of me? And God answered her, and he said, 2 nations are in your womb. Twins were growing in her womb. And just as they were struggling within her, God told her they're going to struggle outside of you with each other for the rest of their lives. Ultimately, God said the elder would serve the younger. Even before they were born, God knew what path their life would take. There is comfort in knowing that we can ask God for answers, and he knows the end from the beginning. He will give us answers, and he will give us wisdom. Finally, when Isaac was 60 years old, here come Esau and Jacob. What joy there must have been in that house. After 20 years of waiting, Isaac and Rebekah had given their fears and their questions to God, and he had come through for them, as he always will for us. So exciting, so awesome. They have the answer. They have 2 beautiful boys. They have God's wisdom. He knows the end from the beginning. Our trust is in him. All those wonderful things. Except they didn't just dance on streets of glory for the rest of their lives. You see, when you serve God, it seems like sometimes you get through one mountain, you get through one problem, you go through a little bit of a valley, and then you start climbing the next mountain. And the next mountain took the form of famine. Soon after the births of the boys, Isaac faced a famine in the land of Canaan. This is extremely similar to the story of Abraham and Sarah, because Abraham chose to wait out a famine in the country of Egypt. Isaac's tribe relied largely on livestock for survival, augmented by some farming. Famine put all of that at risk. It was pretty much an annihilation for a sheep herder to go through a famine. Isaac was afraid. It doesn't say that he was going to flee to Egypt like his father. It says that he began to flee, and then in Genesis 26:5, God spoke to him and said, don't go to Egypt. Don't go to Egypt. So Isaac was following after his father's footsteps. He was about to make the same mistake, as Brother Mike told us last week, that Abraham had made when he left and he went to Egypt in the middle of a famine. Isaac was seriously considering going to Egypt. But as we saw in our last lesson, Abraham had fallen into sin in Egypt, and Egypt was not the promised land. God was doing his best to keep this family out of Egypt. God instructed Isaac, do not go to Egypt. And God extended the covenant he made between Abraham and his father in Genesis chapter 26 and verse 5. And I want to read that. Because God said, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. That's why there was a covenant with him. Again, God made a connection between obedience and blessing. Isaac dwelt in Gerar is the next verse. The very next verse after this says, Isaac dwelt in Gerar. Despite his fears, Isaac had enough faith to obey God. He stayed where he was. He did not continue on his way to Egypt. He chose to trust, okay, I want to run where I know there would be better crops and better livestock accommodations for my family. But if God is saying stay out of Egypt, I trust him enough. I have enough fear and reverence of him that I will listen to his word and I will stay right where I am. He stayed in Gerar as God had instructed, and he trusted God to provide for him and bless him there. So we're starting to see who Isaac was becoming. We've watched him walk through many trials of his faith. We've watched him walk through many things that would have derailed him, or either could have derailed him or caused him to trust in God more. And now we're seeing that he chooses to trust in God. I can't wait to see where it goes. I know you're excited. We'll pick right back up tomorrow in part 4. God bless you.